Hello again, I'm Greg Ramirez, Emergency Manager for Clackamas Fire. Today, joining me is a very good and longtime friend, Alice Bush. Alice and I actually went to college together, and so we've known each other for quite some time, so we've got some history. Alice is, everybody has a better title than me, so I have to read these. The Division Chief of Operations for Multnomah County Emergency Management. You know my title. Mine's not that long, so it must not be that important. So Alice is here to talk to us about being disaster resilient. And Alice, exactly what does disaster resilient mean?
Well, resilience is your ability to bounce back after any kind of disruption. So disaster resilience is essentially 4 legs to a table.
Okay.
It's access to information and education. So that the information that we put out in government needs to be in a language people speak
Okay.
and on a platform that they trust.
Certainly.
And then physical health, psychological hardiness,
Okay.
and what we think is the most important is community connections.
Very
and
good.
that's research has demonstrated that's the most important.
I know that that's a big topic every time we discuss resilience, and the amount of emphasis you place on making sure that your community's ready, knowing your neighbors, things of that nature. Why is that so important?
Well, there's been that report, the Oregon Resilience Plan, that a lot of really smart people wrote.
Thank you.
And that's right. And after that plan, one of the things they found out is that there's a pretty significant gap after the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. There's a pretty significant gap for us to get our infrastructure back online.
Right.
And while they have a 50-year plan to make that gap as short as 2 weeks,
Right.
That's a 50-year plan to shrink that gap
Right.
to 2 weeks.
And even that 2 weeks is a long time.
Even 2 weeks is a long time, and certainly those of us in government and in the military, such as yourself, there's a lot of plans to try and bring in resources.
Right.
Even our biggest disaster, the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, even that is only impacting the 3 states, right? So
Right.
the rest of the country and world is unimpacted, and so they will show up and start trying to help out. But it's going to take them a while to navigate our damaged infrastructure.
It
to
will
help
take
out.
quite some time as we look at those issues in my role with the military. It's going to take several weeks before we can actually move resources across the country, stage them, and then bring them into to the Willamette Valley to begin rescue operations. So in that period of time, it's going to be up to us to be resilient,
Right,
like you
right.
said. So knowing that local authorities are going to be challenged to deliver rescue resources, and that federal resources are going to take some time, what's your recommendation for how long families should target for being prepared?
Well, the Oregon Emergency Management has made the recommendation that everyone should be ready for 2 weeks. So
Okay.
they have a 2-week ready campaign. And that's a great measurement of time to be ready.
Okay.
We're hoping that at that point, government and our non-governmental partners, which actually make up about 80% of recovery.
Okay.
So our faith organizations, our non-governmental organizations, and government will be working together, and we think we can get some semblance of water distribution, food, tarps, equipment, supplies, shelters up and running. We're pretty confident we can do that within 2 weeks.
Very good. So coming back to the idea of neighborhood resiliency, families, neighborhoods, what can the individual family do to better connect with their local community?
Well, engage in their local community. So, I mean, it's as easy as, those national night outs
Right, I was just
where,
gonna say that, right.
where people close their street and they invite their neighbors out and they have a barbecue. And I think a lot of people think that if we're planning for a disaster, we need to talk about the disaster.
Right.
And you don't need to talk about the disaster. You just need to get to know your neighbors. And we were talking before this started that we don't all like all of our neighbors. We don't all like all of our family, and yet we get along with our family. We figure out how to navigate
Right.
our families, and we can figure out how to navigate our neighborhoods. And if you like 10 of your neighbors, then those are the 10 you invite over, and
Of
you get
course.
to know those folks. They may know 2 more neighbors. So you just kind of slowly build your neighborhood community. I'm really fortunate. I know most of my neighbors that are right across the street and on my block. We actually have dinner together once a week. It's our
Once a
disaster.
week?
It's our disaster resilience team.
Nice.
And but I think the one of the important things is to to think about what you would want to know about your neighbors
sure.
after a disaster, and it's pretty much like what do you do?
What skills? What do you have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What might we
Well, that's
be
a good
able
point.
to do for
What
each
weaknesses?
other?
Do you have people, vulnerable people that might need extra assistance, things of that nature?
Right. Yeah.
Good. Well, I think that things like the National Night Out are perfect opportunities, but even Halloween trick or treating.
That's right. That's right.
Just knocking on doors and getting to know your neighbors. I think one of the things that we've discussed is when you look at things like Christchurch, New Zealand, and other incidences that have happened in Mexico. When I watch those videos, I don't see uniforms. I see neighbors helping neighbors.
That's right. Your first responder is the first person to get to you, and it's
That's right.
likely going to be a neighbor.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think that's a take-home message that we all need to be aware of, that we're going to be responsible for ourselves and for our neighbors.
I think, we talk a lot about the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake because it is the biggest one. And
Sure.
and I think we all think if you're prepared for the Cascadia subduction zone, you're ready for anything,
I would
except for
think so.
zombies. But,
Right. There's that.
the CDC has said there's no such thing as zombies. So.
I'm not convinced.
So if we're ready for Cascadia subduction zone, that's great. And I still feel like people should become familiar with their neighborhoods, right? So their local community, whether it's where they work or where they play, where they pray, where they live. There's hazards that exist in different locations. My house is right across the street from or right across the river, I should say, from the tank farm. So in my disaster plan, I have to have an evacuation plan as well.
Right.
So everyone needs to first be kind of familiar with what their hazards are and then talk to their family about what they're going to do about it.
Sure.
And once you've figured out what your hazards are and what you're going to do about it, you have to figure out if you are there yet. Are we ready to do what we said we wanted to do about it? And if you're not, you need to address the gap, whether that's taking a class, getting some equipment, storing some water.
And then exercising.
And then practicing it.
Practicing it,
right,
absolutely.
yeah.
So that's one of the things that we discussed was the threats that impact our community, the wildfire, flood, winter storm, things of that nature. But you're saying that you need to take a closer look at those things that might just impact your vicinity.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's a great point.
And I think I store water everywhere in my house, and my husband makes fun of me.
We were telling
a
that
little
story before you came in.
That's right.
If you go to Alice's home, you will see under the bookcases, behind bookcases, under the sofa, there's water stored everywhere. So Alice is certainly a good example.
And so I have a lot of stored water, and Portland actually had a boil water notice where 650,000 people had to boil their water. And my husband came home from work, and I said, hey, we're on this boil water notice. And he immediately grabbed a pan, and he started filling the pan with water. And I said, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm boiling water. And I was like, well, we've got,
That's right.
It's not just for an earthquake, right? So the water that I have stored underneath all the chairs, it also keeps my dog. I have a Labrador Retriever who likes to chase balls, and it keeps the balls from rolling
Perfect.
underneath the chairs. So it's great.
Perfect.
Dual purpose.
Fantastic. Alice, this has been a great discussion. I think that it's a great take-home message that we not only need to prepare ourselves, but also reach out to our communities, because when a disaster does strike, it's going to be us relying on ourselves, our families, but also our neighbors to be more resilient. So Alice, thank you again for coming in to talk with us.
You're welcome.
Continue to check in with us throughout the month of September as we bring you more topics on disaster preparedness. Again, I'm Greg Ramirez, Emergency Manager for Clackamas Fire. Have a good day.